Hey guys, today I have a different kind of video for you, and there are no guns in it. So before you turn me off, you might want to check it out because I think it's a pretty interesting story. Now this comes to us from Connor, who was a subscriber, still is a subscriber to our channel, and he was at SOS this past February. I met him for the first time at SOS, and he brought along some information about his great-grandfather. He went through the story, went through the pictures. I thought it was so unique that I asked him to share it with all of you. Now today is April 18th, which just happens to have been his great-grandfather's birthday. Another unique part of this story is, if you remember the video we did about Otto Kron, here, check it out if you haven't seen it yet. The video about Otto Kron, he was actually a guard at Dachau, an SS officer, guard at Dachau in the early 30s. And Connor's great-grandfather was a prisoner in Dachau in the early 30s. It's possible that they ran into each other at some point. But anyway, here's the story. Hope you enjoy it.
Hello, my name is Connor Palmer. I will be speaking today about my great-grandfather and the research that me and my Uncle Chuck have done on his life. Originally, my great-grandfather Georg Wagner was born in Nuremberg, Germany in 1893. He eventually, in 1913, enlisted in the 1st Royal Bavarian Field Artillery Unit in the 7th Battery. He served throughout the whole entirety of the war. He's won several different medals and was injured 3 separate times, including a double hernia during the First World War after he fell off of a horse. After the war, he led a very interesting life. For starters, in 1928 in Munich, where he was living at the time, he joined the Communist Party, and whilst in the Communist Party for 2 years, he didn't do much. He went to meetings and whatnot. He said he joined because he worked as an accountant at a construction company. Whilst there, he met some party members, and one of the people that he had been living with from 1928 to 1930 suggested that he should look at possibly, working with the Communist Party a little further. He met with Hans Biemler and Fred Fruth and Franz Mueller, who were people that were working inside the KPD. Whilst he met with them, they talked with him about possibly becoming an informant for the KPD, which was the Communist German Party. And they decided that he'd be perfect for the role, considering he was a World War I veteran. He was a member of Der Stahlhelm, which was a group of veterans association that was also a paramilitary group. They had decided on that. They decided the party as well with which he should spy on, and that was the NSDAP, better known as the Nazi Party. So he ended up getting in contact with some members who got him hired on at the Brown House, which was the Munich headquarters of the Nazi Party. So he got hired on in 1930. He became a member of the SA before becoming a member of the party. He joined the party and got member number 271,556. He joined on August 1st of 1930. Whilst there, he worked in the Brown House in the recording department. So he went through and amended and adjusted party member numbers and the list of party members. At night, he would take a book home, copy down all the lists of the members, and he would eventually then send that off to Berlin to the KPD party, so then they would keep track of members of the NSDAP. One of his main things that he wrote about to the KPD officials and whatnot was, and he leaked it to the press, was, and this was an issue back then in the 1930s, but Ernst Röhm, who was the leader of the SA, is famously known nowadays as a homosexual, and at the time it was very frowned upon. So my great-grandfather ended up getting a bunch of stories together about Ernst Röhm and people that he brought up in the SA because of his relationship with them. He also, in 1931, joined the SS. He became a member of the 1st SS Standard, 3rd Sturmbahn. In 9 months, he went from a Scharführer, which is like a corporal, to a Truppführer, which is an NCO, all the way up to a Sturmführer within, like I said, within 9 months, and he was an adjutant to his Sturmbannführer. He sat in meetings with Sepp Dietrich. He would write reports, which he would then give to his Sturmbannführer, but then he would also take those reports and write up something to send to the communist newspapers. and the communist newspapers would then, revise it and then publish it a little bit after, so that there were no questions as where they got the information from. And he hid low in the SS for a while. He, just worked his way through. But in 1932, he eventually got caught because, first of all, he stabbed 2 SA men at a beer hall in Munich, which that brought up questions. But they released him after a month. They thought it was just SASS, but then he was arrested again 8 days later. And at that point, he had been fired from the Brown House. But they told him just to shut up, don't say anything about what the party's about, don't give any details, which of course now they know that because he was a spy, he was doing that. But whilst he was in prison for the arson case, they found out that he was a spy. So they kicked him out of the party in December of 1932. I have a picture of him in his SS uniform, which you probably have already seen. And he was demoted first from Sturmführer, which is a lieutenant, officer 1, down to an SS man, and then a couple days later he got the notification he was kicked from the party and kicked from the SS. So after 3 months, he got released from the arson case, and then 3 months later, in March of 1933, he was arrested after the rise of the Nazis. He was arrested by the same Sturm that he belonged to in the SS. They brutally beat him up. 50 SS men stormed his house, ripped him out, ripped him away from my grandmother and my great-grandmother, and then took him to the Munich police headquarters, where they brutally beat him up and left him for dead in a basement for 3 days. He did wake up. He was laying in a pool of blood. He had all of his teeth knocked out besides 6. So after that point, he went on trial for the case of bodily harm when he stabbed the SA men. Any idea of self-defense was thrown out. So he was sentenced to 10 months for the bodily harm to the 2 SA men that he stabbed. After the 10 months, normally you would be released. But because of the time period, he was put into protective custody and sentenced to Dachau. In Dachau, he was treated terribly. Upon the minute he stepped foot there, 2 Scharführers asked, "Where's the spy?" as soon as the bus arrived. He was taken out of line. He was brutally beaten. And then for the first 5 days, the kitchen staff brutally beat him as soon as he would come in. The only time the beatings stopped as seriously as they were was when they found out that he was a war veteran because of his double hernia. And that stopped that. And then he was in the camp for another 2.5 years. He got released in 1936. His prisoner number was 6,736. And after that period, he couldn't hold a job because he was known as someone who was a communist before the rise of the Nazis. So he just went around, couldn't find anything. Eventually, he left Munich in 1943 without telling the Gestapo, and fled, and just went to Linz, Austria, where he worked for the Storer Company, which was a steel factory. And there he led a resistance group, and he helped to get partisans from occupied Yugoslavia up to Linz, and then he would take them from Linz to Vienna into occupied Italy, or Allied occupied Italy. So throughout all that, he lived a very interesting life. After the war, he just had an accounting firm, and yeah, he died in 1954 in a vehicle accident, but that's basically his whole entire life story. So thank you for your time.